Welcome to Podcast 360, powered by the Podcast Academy. In 3 questions answered in 60 seconds each, you'll experience a 360-degree view of podcasting from a lineup of industry experts. The hosts of your favorite podcasts will take turns interviewing each other, creating a chain of podcast knowledge and perspective. Let's meet our industry experts. Today's host is...
Hello, I am Bernadette Joy, and you heard me last week on my guest interview with Mandy Woodruff, and she is the host of Brown Ambition, and I am the host of Crush Your Money Goals.
And who is our guest this week?
Hi, my name is Stefanie Gonzales. I am the co-host of the Crush Your Money Goals podcast, along with Bernadette Joy, and I am also a debt-free millionaire like she is, and the founder of the Women's Wealth Effect, a professional finance brand focused on helping women learn how to invest and build wealth.
First, the game before the game. We ask our guests to share 2 truths and a lie. Our host will guess which is the lie, and we'll find out the answer together at the end of our conversation. Let's play Podcast 360.
All right, Steph, I feel very confident I'm going to get this right, but maybe not. So as part of the podcast game, we're going to do the 2 truths and a lie, and you're going to tell me all of those things, and then I'm going to make a guess, but we'll hold the answer until the end. So are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, so number 1 is I started dancing flamenco when I was 3 years old. There was a lady who taught flamenco back in my hometown, and interestingly enough, I studied under her for over a decade. And I'm actually going to be traveling to her hometown next week with my family. So we'll be going to Madrid. Then the second one is after the pandemic, my husband and I read a book together called Quit Like a Millionaire. And after that, we started getting really serious about managing our money and investing for financial independence. We paid off over $420,000 worth of debt. We became millionaires at the age of 37. And in 2022, we moved together to Portugal after a few years of exploring the country on and off and making sure that was a place that we wanted to actually live. And the third one is I love, and I'll say again, love numbers. It's actually one of the core parts of my coaching practice whenever I actually work with women and help them not only understand their numbers, but really get a bit more intimate with them. So I love forecasting, helping them really face their data and their facts, even if it's uncomfortable, and really helping them grow their confidence in navigating their relationship, not only with their money, but their personal numbers for the rest of their life. So that love runs really deep.
I really thought that I was going to nail this, but I feel like you're tricking me because, okay, I think it's this one of the situations where there's a slight lie in one of them, as in like maybe you started flamenco when you were 4 and not 3, because I know you did flamenco and I know that you actually really do forecasting. Oh no! I'm going to guess that the lie is the flamenco, but not that because not that you did flamenco, but maybe the age that you started. That's what I'm going to guess.
We'll see at the end.
Okay, well, now it's the time for the 360 portion of Podcast 360. I'm going to ask you 3 questions about podcasting, and you'll have 60 seconds to answer each. And once we get through the rapid round, then we'll go into one of the subjects and take it into greater detail. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
So question 1 is, I know that you and your husband, Joe, it feels like the 2 of you are always on the same page, but I think we all know practically that managing finances as a couple is really hard. So for podcast listeners, how do you encourage people to get other people to get on the same page with you when it comes to financial freedom?
Yeah, I mean, I think number 1 is really be patient with each other in the sense that my husband was the first one that was all about financial independence. And he was really seeding me these concepts, these YouTube videos, these pieces of learning for almost 5 years. And I just wasn't ready, right? I was managing our money, but I wasn't ready to have this conversation. But him knowing me so well, he knew when it was the right time to really dig into that discussion further because he believed in me as a person. He believed in us together. And we had actual shared goals. So that was a big part of, I think our foundation to begin with. I think the other thing is understand what role you each want to play. Maybe you guys aren't the data people, like both of you, right? Maybe one's operational, one is the dreamer, and figure out how that works for you. It's different for everyone, but being able to have conversations and have them openly and honest is super important.
Right at time. All right. Next question is, we met a couple of years ago and I suddenly asked you one day to become my podcast co-host. And you hadn't necessarily hosted a podcast before. So my question to you is, what made you say yes? And what was your favorite thing about doing this podcast for Crush Your Money Goals?
The say yes part for sure was a big part you. And I think the second part was I was wanting to do a podcast. And I think just like, my relationship with Joe kind of formulated over time with him being patient and understanding when to kind of get into the conversation, you knew I was eager to start a podcast. And you had this opportunity that you wanted to bring to me at this specific point in time because you kind of knew that there was this interest there, right? So you made it very easy to say yes. One of my favorite parts, though, was not only just being able to have conversations with you, but I felt like you took opportunities to give me some real feedback. And those were things I never really got in a really constructive way, even in my professional career. And so it's super awesome to see that I was having this moment of fun, but also this moment of development along the way, which was really great.
I love that. So this past season, we did a lot of interviews, but the season before, you actually did a couple of solo episodes. So can you share some tips for podcasters who are interested in doing solo episodes versus interview episodes?
Yeah, I think for solo episodes, really have to figure out what is the value that you're trying to portray or what's the purpose that you're trying to portray to your audience. Are they really trying to get to know you? Are they trying to get to know you as a person? Are you really trying to create a personal behind the scenes look in like your mind and how you think? Or are you trying to deliver very specific value because this is a part of your funnel, right? What is the real strategy that you're trying to use with that specific episode? Because every episode counts. You never know who is listening, and it needs to really be a part of your business plan. For me, and we talked about this, we weren't trying to be the million download podcast. We were really trying to reach the right people and give them the right information, the right evergreen information, so this stuff would last long and we could always repoint to it. And so the RSU episode, the FI episode, those were things that I was trying to give to our audience so that they could come to it anytime and decide if they wanted to work with me or you at any point in the future.
I love it. You've been on time with every single question.
I know.
This is why I like you, because I will just go off the rails and you just keep us.
Podcast 360 will be back in just a moment. And we're back with Podcast 360.
So when it comes to one of the questions that we want to deep dive in, I actually would love to deep dive on that last one. So you mentioned the word evergreen, which is really important to think about if you're going to start a podcast. How do you balance between evergreen and what's trending? And you and I have had conversations about should we talk about the trendy thing right now or should we talk more about evergreen? So have you had a preference leaning more towards trendy versus evergreen? And what advice do you think you'd have for people who are trying to make that choice?
Yeah, in all honesty, I consider myself an educator in this space of personal finance, specifically for women. And I lean towards the evergreen side because I know for myself personally, and somebody that's really pursuing being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want in a real way, I'm partially there. But I want to be able to create content that women can always go back to. And I don't have to be on doing it, redoing it over and over. In all honesty, and it's a selfish thing, but that's just the reality of it, right? And I think we've had these conversations over and over. The social media parts of things, the podcast parts of things, the YouTube parts of things can feel very hamster wheel if you let them, because you're just constantly trying to do the next thing, because this stuff is evolving all the time. But having a very clear strategy on how it's going to fit into your business and how you want either your business to scale or you want to, be a part of the trendy thing and be that person that's the thought leader on the front of the latest news, you have to decide what that is. And for me, the evergreen part, and I think you confirming a lot of that opinion in our conversations has felt like the right thing because it's something that I can always point back to. And, even the last season we did, for those that are listening, I kind of had to drop off at the end in terms of the execution because of a family emergency. But I can repoint to all those episodes even 6 months from now. You know what I mean? Because they are episodes that I'm really excited about, things that I think our audience can still continue to benefit from. Just because you created an episode 4 or 5 months ago doesn't mean that it's invalid, right? Or it's not valuable to your audience if you want it to be. So
I think it's a great point. I think we had that as a strategy, but not on purpose. And it actually just worked in our favor, where if you do have a podcast where you're working on what's the trending news of the day or the news of the week, you have to get those episodes out sooner than later. Otherwise, it does feel out of touch or out of scope of what people care about. But because we happen to choose this evergreen path, we were able to record a lot of episodes ahead of time and farther in advance, and we could like move them around to see if they made more sense in a certain way. That I don't know that we would have had that privilege if we had decided to say what's the flavor of the week. And I appreciate that you led us in that direction too, because when you did those topics like RSUs and, you know, what it's like to be fire in another country, like those are things that can stand the test of time, but those were topics that I would not have been able to do on my own. So I'm so appreciative of you, and not only for doing this today, but for being my co-host for the last 2 seasons. And so we're about to wrap things up. The last thing we need to do is figure out what the lie was. I'm like debating if I should stick to my answer or not. I don't feel good about it. I'm going to stick with it, but I think I'm wrong.
The one that you chose was not a lie. It was total truth. So I did start at 3. But the little bit of the lie is in the Portugal part. We moved to Portugal and I came sight unseen. So my husband moved to Singapore sight unseen whenever I became an expat with the old tech company that I used to work for. And I came to Portugal sight unseen. Obviously, my boys did too. But yeah, I had never been to Portugal and moved here in 2022. And it has been everything that we expected it to be and more.
Oh my gosh. Well, now that you say that, that makes so much sense, because I remember when you and I met, you were in Singapore, but just always assumed that y'all had been to Portugal before you decided to move there. But now that we're having this conversation, I remember us having a conversation when we're in Portugal about how I was looking at it to see if I potentially wanted to move there. And you're like, oh yeah, I was never here until I moved here. And I remember you saying this now. You're sneaky and I love it.
Sneaky. Just checking to see if people were listening to our podcast episodes, you know?
Well, you have been a wonderful guest. So if people want to continue to follow you, where can they find you?
Yes, you can always find me on Instagram at Women's Wealth Effect, just one word, or you can go to www.womenswealtheffect.com. I'm constantly updating what's going on, whether it's in my coaching program or other free resources and tools. You can see some of the YouTube videos that myself and my partner have up on our YouTube channel, but you can always find out what's going on, latest and greatest there.
I love it. And I highly, highly recommend that all of you follow her. So thank you for not only being my podcast guest today, thank you for being my friend. And thank you to the Podcast 360 team for letting us do this fun activity today.
Thank you for listening to Podcast 360, where you experience a 360-degree view of podcasting. Special thanks to the Podcast Academy and DCP Entertainment. Follow us on social media at The Ambies and at DCP Official on Instagram. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode.